Today we're going to talk about how not to bore your customers to death. When we're enthusiastic about something, as I know all of you are about Cornell, we want to tell people all about it. And sometimes we really want to tell them all about it. And that doesn't always serve. The focus here is getting your message, your offering, your value down to its very essence. And that's how you don't bore your customers to death. So what specifically are we going to learn today? We're going to learn 3 things. Actually, we're going to learn a bunch of things, but one of the things you're going to learn is you always got to boil it down to 3. And so I'd look like a real prat if I didn't. So these days, you can't get anybody to show up for any kind of marketing session unless you bow in the general direction of social media. I'm not a social media expert. I work with a lot of social media experts at different companies. But I threw in my little thing. What's the one ingredient you have to make social media work for you? So I'm going to let you in on that secret, and it's not a very new secret. 3 tests to determine if your marketing message for whatever it is you're marketing at the moment is actually going to help you sell. Is it good or is it not? How do you tell? And 3, if it's not where you want it to be, how do you get it there? And that's where the message matrix comes in. This is a handy-dandy tool that all of you are actually going to be able to use starting this hour, starting right now, to get from long and detailed to short, crisp, sharp. Now, I'm a marketing guy, right? So that means that there has to be like a bonus. But wait, there's more. You also get the Ginsu knife. Yeah, do you like that? I have to go way back in my throat to get that one. Here's the bonus. Differentiation. Any kind of marketing, people always talk about, well, you got to be differentiated. Got to differentiate us from Harvard. Got to differentiate Oracle from Microsoft, whatever. Differentiation. I'm going to make a statement that you probably have never heard before. From a marketing and sales perspective, differentiating can kill you. It can harm you. I bet nobody's ever said that to you before, but it really can. Differentiation is a loaded gun that has to be pointed in the right place at the right time. And I'm going to tell you how to tell when it's, in fact, the right time. Okay? So that's what you're going to learn. Now, I'm going to tell you how not to bore customers. I got to start out by saying it's not the worst thing you can do in marketing. I'm not talking about murder or theft here. I'm taking the worst thing you can do in marketing. So it's the second worst thing you can do in marketing. Anybody know what the worst thing you can do is in marketing? Not market. Yeah, actually, somebody said that. I'm going to have to revise the slide. That probably really is the worst thing you can do.
Offend someone.
There is that. I was actually thinking about something else. Before boring, the worst sin actually is confusing. If people don't know what it is you're selling, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for them to buy it. Right? So if somebody didn't know that Cornell was the product you're selling or that alumni involvement is the product you're selling, it would be extraordinarily difficult for them to buy it. And it is possible in marketing to get so lost in your own language, your own advantages, your own differentiation that you forget to tell people what you're selling in a very clear and simple way. So, second sin is boring. First sin, confusion. So let's talk about that a little bit, but first we have to bow in the social media direction, the great god of social media that now drives us all. By the way, I would caution you all to silence your cell phones and limit your use of Twitter to highly positive reviews of this session. Okay? Good. All right, social media. Social media is very powerful, but also a loaded gun. I often see it the way I see people, friends, colleagues use it as an exciting new platform for boring your customers. Never has it been possible to communicate so little, so often, to so many. And most of them don't care. Right? There are, in fact, people that care, about your cat. I'm probably more interested actually in people's cats than I am in a lot of other things about them. But you know, in a business context, you have to choose your social media shots very carefully. So what is the one magical ingredient that transforms social media from an exciting platform for boring your customers into a platform for actually giving them something they want? Well, the media is new. The ingredient is really, really old. In fact, it's probably one of the oldest human characteristics there is. A story. From the time where we can not even talk, but hear people talk, it's tell me a story. We all want a story. So McKinsey has made God knows how much money promoting this idea of situation, complication, resolution. What is that? That's a repackaging. Once upon a time, then there was the big bad wolf. And then the woodsman came, chopped him up, and they lived happily ever after. That's situation, complication, resolution. So the Brothers Grimm got there first. All right? We all want a story. Stories engage us. I'm sure that you have all told stories from your own lives, for example, to engage people in Cornell. It's just one example. Now, why are stories so powerful in a marketing context? Well, one reason is just that it's hard to remember and retain random information, right? In fact, when I was at Cornell, one of my psych professors talked about experiments where a guy just tried to self-experiment in psychology early on and just memorize strings of random numbers. And he got up to a good number with practice, and then he eventually went insane and was committed for the rest of his life. He drove himself nuts, memorizing literally meaningless information. Now, memorizing that same number of bits of information, whether it's 40, 50, 100, is very easy if it's in the context of a story. So it's a lot easier to remember one necklace than it is to remember 40 pearls rolling around on the table. What is the only difference between those two things? A string. A string. 2 cents worth of fishing line hangs it all together. Well, that's what your story is. And your story needs to literally come first. If we were making a movie together, we wouldn't say, let's get a whole bunch of special effects and a whole bunch of really expensive actors, and let's make some sets, and then figure out a script. So the story literally comes first. And by the way, that's one virtue of a story. Compared to sets, actors, all the production stuff that's a part of your marketing, a story, which is one person at a typewriter figuring it out or having some conversations, that's really cheap. So get the story straight before you go into production, whenever you can. Now, just because you've got a story, of course, doesn't mean your story is actually good. Well, good, though, only means a few things in a marketing context. Good basically means your story helps you sell. How do you know that your story is actually salesworthy? How do you know that this story is going to help you sell? Well, there's 3 pretty simple tests you can do to figure that out. 1, clear. Remember we said that boring your customers isn't the worst thing to do, confusing them is? Clear means your customers understand what you're talking about. That is to say, they understand the problem you're talking about, they understand how you're proposing to solve it. It doesn't mean they buy it, it doesn't mean they like it, it doesn't mean they value it yet, but it means they know what you are talking about. We get so lost in the language of marketing and the hyperbole and it's going to be great and it's super fragilistic that we forget that people actually can't buy something before they understand what it is. So they have to understand your story. That is literally your first hurdle in marketing, is just clarity of communication. What is your second hurdle? Compelling. I not only understand what you're offering, but I see some value in it for me. I see enough value in it for me, in fact, that I'm ready to take some action on it. I am compelled. Third, consistent. Now, this isn't so much about your message itself. This is about how often and how consistently and from how many different channels people hear your message. So if I read about your business in the paper, ideally, some of the same information is in there as when I talk to you, or as when I see a billboard if you've got a billboard, or your website if you've got a website. So consistency creates a sense of competence and a sense of credibility and an understanding of your story that is really necessary for buying. You've all heard the rules about, people need to touch something 3 times or 10 times or who knows what the number is before they take action on it. Well, if every time they touch it they hear something entirely different, then they start to wonder. Consistency creates confidence. The opposite creates doubt and confusion, and doubting and confused people move on. All right, so is your story clear, compelling, and consistent? Now, the number one barrier to reaching those goals, to having a story that is clear, compelling, and consistent, is just too much stuff in there, too much information. People talk about the elevator pitch. If your elevator pitch is 2 pages long, that's not an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is 1 sentence that captures the essential value of your business. And we're going to talk about how to get to that. So more broadly, though, the number one reason that marketing messages bore or confuse your customers is you've just got too much stuff in there, too much information. So we want to get past that. We want to boil it down. So how do you boil it down? How do you get to that? Well, first let's talk a little bit about how we got where we are, how we got to too much information. We get there a couple of ways. How many of you are writers in some capacity? Great, great, okay. So anybody who's a writer knows that a blank page can be a very scary thing to confront. We sit down in front of a piece of nothing and we try to create something. One of the things that they tell you as a writer, one of the exercises you do is you just start writing, you just dump your brain, you just get it all down, which is fantastic. Now, there is, however, a part 2, which as marketers we sometimes forget. Because if we don't then go back and really edit and pick out the most important points for our customers, we wind up with this. I've worked for some big companies, like Oracle, and trouble with companies like that is we know too much. We know too much about our own stuff. And believe me, we want to tell you all about it. So this is kind of a classic high-tech marketing approach where we blather on for an hour and then it comes down to, that's why we need a computer. That's not what we're going for here. So let's talk about how we get to that level of clarity and simplicity. So we all know that less is more, but making the choices of what to cut is not always a simple task. And most of us have never really been given any kind of a tool or guideline for doing that, especially in a marketing context. So I would like to give you one. And I've done some work on it, but it's by no means original to me. It's just a structure and a process that any of you can use starting right now, starting today, to boil down the essential value of your business into a very tight set of simple messages that are clear. People can understand what you're talking about. That are compelling. They actually matter to people. And that can be consistently used whether you're doing a brochure, a website, speaking at an alumni event, you name it. The core of your marketing message can be distilled down to a very, very, very small package. And I'd like to show you how to get there. What is the matrix, as they used to say in the movie ad? The matrix is a process for doing that boiling down, and the structure is almost brutally brief and simple. Literally, your whole business, or at least the essence of your value, is going to fit on a slide. Now, a customer's not going to see this slide. That's too dense. But I want to show you what this thing looks like. So the message matrix has 3 pieces. a really short, concentrated, single-sentence positioning statement, 3 key messages, and I'll explain in a minute why the number shall be 3, and then 3 things to prove each of those messages. And that really is all there is. That's it. Now, you can base all kinds of things on it. You can spin a much broader story. But in essence, this is the core of how you can simply and clearly and hopefully non-boringly express your business. I'm going to give you an example. This is like the cooking shows where, you know, the guy says, and here's one I prepared earlier. In this case, it was quite a bit earlier, back when I was still working at Oracle. But let me show you how this plays out. 1 sentence, 1 big claim. That's your positioning statement. That is an elevator pitch that you could actually deliver in 1 floor. What are we? Well, Oracle Advanced Procurement, that's a product name, is the integrated software suite. That's a category, so you know what shop you're in. That does some big benefit, dramatically cuts all your supply management costs. Now, I want you to notice something here in making that one big claim, because we tend to feel like we have to sort of stuff the whole book into the table of contents, and it's not really true. What I want you to notice is what isn't here way at the top level. What have I not done when I make this claim that we dramatically cut all your supply management costs? What have I not done?
Told me how.
Yeah, I haven't proved it. I haven't proved anything. I have just made a large, naked claim. Why? Well, because if I have only one thing to say, that's all I'm going to have time for. And if you don't need that, if you're not in the supply management business or for some other reason we're just not going to come together, I'm going to save us both a lot of time. You're not going to know I can do this thing, but you're going to know what the thing is. And then, if you're interested, we'll go down a bit. And you will say to me, huh, really, all my supply management costs, that's millions of dollars of stuff. I don't believe a word of it. And I'll say, great. Let's talk about that. You know that your supply management costs split into 3 areas. The money you spend on stuff, the money you spend cutting the POs and buying the stuff, and the money you spend with people charging Mercedes on their company credit cards and ripping you off about the stuff. Now, if you're in that particular area of business, you still don't know that I do anything for you, but I've taken my big claim and I've sliced it out a bit into 3 areas. I've given you a way to navigate. And that means that if you're only concerned, say, about the compliance thing, you can drill into that. So I've started to give you a little hierarchy to go down. Now, I still haven't actually proved anything. I've gone another level down. I've taken the big value claim, I've sliced it up, but I haven't proved anything. At some point, I'm actually going to have to prove something, and that's where the proof points come in. And we'll talk about that. Let's go forward a little bit now to look at each of these pieces in a little bit more detail so that you can walk out of here and start doing something like this right away if you want to. So the positioning statement, hardest thing to come up with for your business. How many people have had someone tell you before, yeah, you need to come up with, like, they may not call it a positioning statement, but what's your little one-liner about what you do? Who you are, what you do, what your business does. How many people have tried to do that? Basically everybody. Okay, good. So this may be helpful. The reason it's so hard, was it hard to come up with that, by the way, to sum up your value in 1 sentence? Yeah? I see somebody says, no, I want to talk to you after. For most people, it's pretty tough. Why? Because there's so much to do and so few words to do it in. So positioning statement's got to do a lot of things. It's got to name your offering. What's the name of your product? Cornell University or the Cornell Alumni Association or, you know, the X solar business. So you got to name the thing. That was the easy part, because you probably already did that. Part 2, category. This is massively underestimated. Remember, we're trying not to bore customers, but we're also trying not to confuse them. You don't want to confuse people. Make sure they know what shop they're in. Make sure they know whether what they've walked into is the tofu shop or the butcher shop. So category serves a very important role. It lets people know what it is you're actually selling so that they know whether they want one. The thing is, ultimately you want them to want yours, but they can't want yours until they want one. So it's very important that they know where they are. So you see that the process we're going through here is pretty short on hyperbole and, it'll be great, and pretty long on specific information to clarify for people what it is you actually do. And then presenting benefits and differentiation comes a little bit later. Okay, so name the thing. Give a category for the thing. And now here's the hard part. State your benefit. You probably deliver 10, 100 benefits in your business. You probably do all kinds of good things for your customers. How are you going to sum it up? Well, it's going to be very, very difficult. But the guideline is this. If you could only say one thing to a new person you'd met, who might be a potential customer, only one thing, and then you were going to be struck with laryngitis, and that was going to be it for the day, what would that one thing be? It wouldn't be something real specific. It wouldn't be something real granular, because you'd be leaving out a whole lot of other important things. So you have to think about all of the benefits you offer, kind of put a big thing of saran wrap around the whole package, and then stick a label on that. So you kind of have to sum it all up. That's why, in the example we were just looking at, we make a big claim like dramatically cutting all supply management costs. It's quite broad, but it's not in orbit because it does constrain the area to one particular part of business. It doesn't just say we'll make you rich. It says it's this one particular domain. So you have to come up with that kind of a summation. It's not easy, but here's a thing that will make it easier for you. Don't feel like you have to prove it. I mean, you will have to prove it. Don't feel like you have to prove it in the same breath. Just make the big, bold claim. It obviously is helpful if it's actually true. By the way, when I got to do this, I got to do one of these at Microsoft in December. And just to give you an idea of how hard this one sentence is so you don't get discouraged when you're working on it yourself, we did a 2-day positioning workshop with all the right people in the room. You want to know how long it took us to come up with the one sentence before we went on to anything else? First day. Exactly. 50% of the time you spend coming up with a message matrix will typically be spent on this one sentence, which is why it's a good thing I don't get paid by the word. So this is where you start to break things down. Not prove them, but break them down. So if the positioning statement is your one big pizza of value, this is where you slice it. Now, how many slices do you make? If you've got a pizza, you can slice it into 12, but you won't. Not in this case. You're going to slice it in 3, and I'll explain why in a bit. But first, let me explain the characteristics of the key messages. So 3 slices of value. They're usually 3 benefit statements. They can, on occasion, be 3 features instead that support your positioning statement's big claim. The Oracle example was a decent one, right? All your supply management costs is your big claim. Well, what are the pieces of that? The stuff costs, the process costs, the compliance costs. So you can break down your big benefit into 3 other benefits. What's the advantage of doing that? Well, it helps people navigate to what they are actually interested in. It gives them a nice clean hierarchy. You're not just blurting everything out at once and leaving them to make their way through it. You're giving them a map, and then they get to pick the path through the map. So that's what you want to do. You want to slice up your key messages into 3 pieces of value. So here's how that breaks down in the Oracle example, right? Here's the big claim, and then we slice that down to reducing your stuff spend, reducing your process spend, and keeping people from buying Mercedes on their company credit cards. Now, I cannot go forward from here without, as they said in Sesame Street, giving you a message from the number 3. Because I get asked this a lot. Why only 3? We do so much. I spend a lot of time in messaging workshops explaining to people that they cannot have 12 key messages. Why is that? Well, our friends Larry, Moe, and Curly are here to help us explain it. Here's how it works. There's something natural and hardwired about the number 3 in the human brain. It shows up in science and memory research. It shows up in the tradition of a 3-act play. It shows up in the 3-reel movie. And the 3rd reel is where Harry and Sally finally get back together. There's just something about it that gives a sense of completion. If you go to 3, it feels complete. It's the Monty Python rule of marketing. Thou shalt not count to 2, save that thou continue to 3. 4 shall not be the number. 5 is right out. If you go to 4, to 5, to 6, people will remember something of what you said. In fact, probably about 3 things. The problem is you have lost control of which 3 things they are. You've done a disservice to yourself because you've lost control of the conversation. You now no longer know what people are going to take away from what you say. That's one problem. You've done a disservice to the customer also, though. That's a problem because you've deprived them of that clean, simple map to navigate through. So the idea is not to blurt out a whole bunch of stuff and make your customer pick their way through it. The idea is to do that hard work for them so that they can find and learn what they need to as easily as possible. Okay? People hate to be sold, but they love to buy. So help them navigate to that buying point. And you can see many examples from many different realms of the rule of 3. Learn it, live it, love it. Now, there is a point in marketing, a point sometimes people never get to, but there is a point in marketing where you actually have to prove you do what you claim. Notice that we have managed to delay that point 2 steps. Here's where it actually comes in. Proof points. So 3, and only 3 proof points for each of your 3 key messages. Now that doesn't mean you don't have more detail. That doesn't mean you can't have longer conversations. But it does mean that at the top level, you still need to keep to that level of simplicity. Now we're actually going to prove we do something. OK, so I say I can cut your spend on goods and services. How do I do that? Well, here's feature 1. Here's feature 2. Here's feature 3 that proves that. Now, in fact, I may have features 4 through 100. But again, I'm going to have to do the work for the customer. I'm going to have to aggregate it up. I'm going to have to boil it down to either 3 aggregated features or just pick out my 3 shiniest objects to talk about as my initial proof and let people take in the detail when they're actually interested. So people will tolerate any level of detail once you've established interest and once you've given them this navigational hierarchy. But simple as possible. You are, in fact, allowed to talk about features, but only after your customers actually care. So that is the totality of a message matrix. So let's talk about differentiation. So premature differentiation. Differentiation, like other things that rhyme with differentiation, is fabulous if it occurs at the right point in time, and not so great if it occurs too early or too late. So how do we know when it's time to focus on differentiation? Well, there's actually, I spent so much time on this that I finally had to create a little mental model for it. How do you know when it's time to talk about how you're better than your competition? It seems a little complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. You want to differentiate after somebody knows they want one. They can't want yours until they know they want one. I can't buy a Mercedes until I know I want a car. Simple as that. So first people have to know what the thing is, what the category is, and that they want one. Let's say it's a car. Then they have to know that you make a car. They have to know you exist in that market. After those 2 very basic sounding things, then it's time to tell them why your car is better. Now, markets and broad bases of customers go through these steps, and so do individuals at a micro level during an individual sales process. Like, let's talk about a macro example. Let's use the car thing. Let's say it's 100 years ago, 120 years ago, and you're a farmer in Iowa, and I'm Henry Ford, and I want to sell you a car. Specifically, I want to sell you a Ford. So, differentiation and how to screw it up. Here's how I could screw it up. I could say, hi, I'm Henry Ford, and you should buy my automobile because it has the most efficient carburetor. Now, I, as a farmer in Iowa, am going to have two questions for you. What are the two questions? What's a car? Right, what's a carburetor? And more importantly, what is a car? So I shouldn't be selling you a Ford at this point. I should be educating you about a car. I should be explaining the benefits of the category. I should be saying a car is kind of like a horse, but it goes faster and you don't have to scoop the poop up. Or whatever the benefits of the category of automobile are. In other words, right now, Ford is irrelevant. It's all about the category. It's all about the car. Now, fast forward 100 years. Everybody knows what a car is. I no longer need to do that piece of education at all. Let's say, though, that I'm a newcomer to the car market. Let's say I'm Hyundai in America 20 years ago, and therefore nobody knows who I am. So what do I have to explain to them? Not yet that Hyundai makes great cars or the less expensive cars or whatever it is. I have to explain to them that I exist. Hi, I'm Hyundai. I make cars. One of my very favorite advertisements of all time was a zero differentiation advertisement. When PeopleSoft, which was an enterprise software company that mostly made HR software, came out with customer relationship management software, they put some full-page ads in the newspaper. Anybody know what that ad said? It only had 3 words.
Where's the beef? Where's the beef?
Nope, that was a different one. Here are the words. You know, genius copywriter here. PeopleSoft has CRM. Not, we are better than Siebel. That would have been a tough claim for them to support. Not any kind of differentiation. PeopleSoft has CRM. Now, if I were a PeopleSoft customer that was trying to decide between implementing a whole separate thing or sticking in PeopleSoft CRM, that would have been of great interest to me. So differentiation, sometimes you can make a sale without any differentiation at all. Sometimes just your existence meets a customer need, and you just have to let them know you're there. So I talk about not boring your customers to death, but there are times when you have to have the courage of your convictions and dare to be dull. We are here. We exist. It is a school. Then we get to differentiation. So, when is it time to differentiate? When the customer knows what the thing you're selling is and what the benefits of the category are. When they know you make one. Now we get to the part where they have to decide, do I want a Hyundai? Do I want a Toyota? Do I want a Honda? Do I want a Mercedes? That's where differentiation comes in. It especially comes in if in a well-known category where you're already seen as a leader or a strong contender. So Cornell is a good example of that. People know what a college is. They know Cornell is a leader or a strong contender. So differentiation is perfectly appropriate if you're trying to sell somebody on, for example, going to Cornell. So in that situation, you get a different set of privileges. You get to focus just on the differentiation. You get to go straight for the competitive throat because you can leave all the other stuff out. It's already there. Mercedes-Benz was able a couple of years ago to put an ad in the New Yorker that just showed a brake. Just a little brake assembly. I didn't even know what a brake assembly looked like, but there it was. Brake assembly. That was their ad. And they just talked about that brake, what was special about it, and the other safety features that made a Mercedes unique. Why did that work? Because everybody already knew what a car was. Everybody already knew that there was a car attached to that brake. And everybody knew Mercedes existed and made good cars. So that's all they had to focus on. If you are in that fortunate position in your business or whatever it is you're advocating, go straight for the throat, go straight for the differentiation. If you're not, or you're not sure you are, make sure you've covered these other steps first. Make sure your audience is with you before they go on to this risk reduction phase where they actually have to decide who to pick. So that's the summary of differentiation and how to either blow it or really use it properly to your advantage. Now, one additional little bonus here. Once you've come up with your positioning statement, your message matrix, give it a little acid test. Make sure that you're flying at the right level of message. Because if you're too high, if you say something like, Cornell University promotes world peace, which may in fact be true, but if your message could be legitimately claimed also by Bank of America and the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, you probably need to reduce your altitude a little bit. That's what people tend to do when they get religion and are jumping up from very granular stuff. They tend to go too high. So you want to fly at this nice level where when you make your claim, you haven't yet proved it, but people can kind of understand what it is, and it's at the right level of aggregation or granularity. So if, on the other hand, you're just way down there and you're talking about the Jeffreys tube and the supercalifragilator to somebody that doesn't know that what you're selling is a spaceship, you need to come up a bit. Now, this is less any kind of a hard and fast rule, more of a felt sense. If you're simply aware of the need to kind of fly at the right level, you'll naturally guide yourself there. I want to end the formal part of the presentation with just a little bit of encouragement so that you'll know that it's possible to start with confusion and mess and over-detail and get to simplicity. This is just an example of some folks I was working with a while back. This is their before picture. Now, my question to you isn't would you buy it? It's do you know what business they're in? Do you know that they're in a business, for that matter? This could be an open source project. You know, I stared at this for a while, and I knew what business they were in, but I wouldn't have known it from this. So this is the kind of very granular stuff that they had on their front page, which is the most direct reflection of their messaging. So what did we do? We played around a little. Well, actually, what we did was agonize a lot for 2 solid days. And we boiled it down to a fairly simple positioning statement, 3 characteristics that supported it in this case, and then finally, a bunch of stuff that proved it out. Now, to really prove out technically that their solution does what we claim, you have to go even further down, but that wasn't their problem. Their problem was that they were starting down here. They were not starting up here. They were not starting at the right altitude. So even something as confused as this can be boiled down to this, which can then get you to all kinds of simpler expressions. For example, you know, take a mini, stretch it out, and say, this is what we do. And that's our positioning statement. And those are, by the way, our 3 key messages. And a lot of detail gets wiped away. If you're interested, please click here to drill down or talk to us. All right, so it is possible. Don't lose hope. It's possible to boil, no matter how complex what you're selling or describing is, you can get it down to this. I promise that this can be done. Thank you so much for having me. And please get in touch.